Hello everyone and welcome back to another vlog. So today's vlog is a little bit unplanned, but I started a book and I'm really having fun with it. The book is called Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff, and I just wanted to explain here that I checked it out from the library, so it's not actually my book. I started reading it right away because it's a pretty big novel and I wanted to finish it well before the due date of this book, and I didn't expect it to be this good, honestly. I read like 140 pages in like the first day of reading it, and this was all physically, so that says a lot about how hooked I was on this book. And I kind of did not expect to really like this book so far, mainly because I had never heard of this book before. I'm not super into like adult fantasy or anything like that, so I hadn't heard of it. I was not really looking for a book like this. It was kind of just one of the ones that was available and I was slightly interested in it. Can I say that I've never read a fantasy novel written by a man? No. I have read The Hobbit, but that was written like a long time ago. I would say like more like a modern fantasy. I don't think I have read another high fantasy book written in modern day that was written by a man. I was honestly kind of looking for a book that was written by a woman just because I feel like they would be able to write the romance a little bit better, and that's kind of what I wanted, but I'm having a lot of fun with this. So the synopsis of this book is actually pretty crazy. It's set during a time where it's been 27 years since the sun last shone on the world. It's just that one day the sun became dark. Nobody knows why, but ever since the sun became dark, all of these dark creatures who were only able to come out at night are now able to come out at all times of the day. The main character in this book is the last Silver Saint, which are basically half vampire hunters. So they're basically stronger than the average human, and it's their mission to hunt down the actual vampires. The main character, whose name is Gabriel de Leon, he is the very last Silver Saint. He's been captured by some vampires, he's in a prison, and he's basically recounting his story of how he got there. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but this is an adult fantasy, so there's like a lot of cussing in it. Other than the cussing, there's some nude pictures in here, which, by the way, there's pictures in this book, which makes it that much more exciting to read. And I don't know, maybe there'll be a sex scene in here. There's about 730 pages in here, and I'm on page 191. So I have a long ways to go with this, but honestly, I'm enjoying this so much that I decided that I would start a vlog on it. And who knows, maybe I'll be super into fantasy after this. I actually have a lot on my bookshelf that I need to get to. I think this one is the catalyst for me to start reading those books on my bookshelf. So yeah, welcome to the start of the vlog. I don't know why I've been holding this book for so long. It's actually very heavy. And I'll see you guys a little bit later when I have something else to update you on.
Think I'm gonna go to sleep again and wake up alone on the floor, 'cause I feel haunted in my bedroom. The floorboards in the next room will keep me warm. Ought to know nothing about you makes me nervous. I feel right at home. 'Cause you ought to know nothing about you makes me anxious. stick around to bring you coffee or a cigarette. I don't think we're done yet, not for now. 'Cause you ought to know nothing about you makes me.
So technically at this point I'm still in LA, but I'm filming this after the fact because I know there's gonna be a lot of footage from me being in LA. So I wanted to film this clip and insert it in between the days just to break up the footage. But at this point I'm about halfway through, more than halfway through with Empire of the Vampire. Personally, I still really love it. I think it's like super action-packed. So if you're like me and you kind of tend to get bored with books, I think this would be a really great book for you. The only real complaint that I have with this book, and it's not even really that big of a complaint, is that the main character is kind of like a grumpy guy and he always just says things that are like really like unlikable, but I think that's the point of it. So I wouldn't really say it's like a complaint. I think he's just like that, and then maybe towards the end he'll like have a softened heart or something. But other than that, I am flying through this book. I think after every single chapter, I just want to keep reading more, and it's exciting enough that I just want to keep going, you know? As you can see, the book is quite large, but it's broken up into 5 or 6 books. So currently I'm on book 4 and I'm about to finish book 4 and move on to book 5. And I think last time I mentioned that he is basically telling his story after the fact. So he goes back and forth between his childhood and becoming a silver saint for the first time. And then it jumps forward to like the situation with the Holy Grail. And I don't know if I mentioned anything about the Holy Grail, but basically they are looking for the Holy Grail to put an end to the endless night, which is the whole thing with the sun being covered in darkness and whatnot. And I feel like I'm going at it in such a roundabout way, but there's so much information in this book that I'm starting to pick up the language. It's like so much easier to just say the words that they always keep saying. After there has been many years of no sunlight, the Silver Saint, which is the half vampire dude, our main character, and a group of people are trying to find the Holy Grail to put an end to the endless night. And they're being chased by multiple people because it is true that they know where the Holy Grail is. As far as the rest of the characters go, nobody likes the main character, obviously because he's a grumpy dude and always is saying stuff that nobody likes. And the rest of the crew consists of the boy who knows where the Holy Grail is, the nun that the Silver Saint knows from his childhood, an old priest, a soothsayer, and some Celtic warrior maiden and her lioness that follows her around. So it's kind of like a hodgepodge kind of crew, and they've all banded together for this one cause to find the Holy Grail. No spoilers here. I think I'm really loving all the information. I think part of it also is because of the vampires in this book, which by the way, there is also like a ton of lore associated with the vampires in this book, and it's quite different from vampires that you've seen in other stories. I literally almost forgot to mention the vampire stuff because I meant to do that. I would say that in other vampire stories, vampires have the choice of who to turn into a vampire, but in this one it's all up to chance who gets turned into a vampire. The idea is that if you get killed by a vampire, you will be turned into a vampire no matter what. But the problem is when you get turned into a vampire. So if you get killed by a vampire and then you wake up as a vampire like a couple minutes or even like an hour later, your body will not have rotted at all, and so you will still maintain like your sanity, your brain and stuff, and you will be considered like a high blood vampire. But most people who get killed by a vampire get turned days or maybe even weeks after they were killed, and by that time your brain would have rotted a little bit, and basically you would be kind of like a zombie. So literally it's all up to chance whether or not you actually get turned into a vampire that's like sane, or if you get turned into like one of those zombie-like creatures instead. Another thing too is that no matter if you are a highborn or one of those zombie creatures, the vampire that killed you will still have control over you. So vampires could essentially have these armies of zombies that follow their rules. There are, what else is there? I guess another thing to mention too about the vampires is they have no sense of humanity with them. Almost every vampire story that I've read, there's always some vampires who are like the classic vampire that wants to kill everything and everyone, just like has no regard for human life. But then there's always like vampires in that same story that fall in love with a human or something like that, or they have like some regard for humans, at least a little bit. But here, the vampires have absolutely no regard for human life. They will kill, they will enslave, they will torture humans. They literally just give no fucks at all. And I think part of the reason why they are like that is the endless night. They literally have no consequences for their actions, and they could essentially rule the world at this point. So that's what I think of this book. And that's a little bit of the lore of the story. I'm starting to understand why people love fantasy novels of this level. I just love all the information and the world building in this book, to the point where I am actually picking up the words and the language that they are using to describe things. So yeah, I'm literally just having so much fun reading this book. We'll see how the ending goes, but I have less than half of it left, so chances are I'm going to like it. And this is only the first book too, so I really wonder how the series is gonna go. But with where I'm at right now, it's gory, it's adventurous, a lot of action, and I'm loving it. So I'm back at home now. I've read a little bit more of Empire of the Vampire. I know I'm filming this on the same day, but I've read a little bit more since the last check-in. And do I have anything else to say about this book? I guess I could say that the book does a really good job at making you feel like everything is pretty much hopeless against the vampires. Because the vampires are pretty much extremely powerful. They're old, so they are much wiser than the average person. They're strong, they're fast, and with certain vampire bloodlines, they have special gifts. So the main vampires that they're fighting right now is the Voss family, and anyone who has the blood Voss basically has the gifts of having stronger skin than the average vampire. Vampires have weakness against fire and silver, unless you come from the Voss family. So Vosses have a resistance against silver, and the much older Voss family members have a good resistance against fire as well. So these vampires are extremely hard to kill, and honestly it feels literally impossible for them to kill these vampires. Like, the stakes are so high here. I almost feel like our protagonists are a little bit helpless against these vampires because they're so incredibly strong. On top of that, they're able to read your mind and get inside your head and stuff. So that's not good either. And there's just so many factors against the main characters that makes them seem so helpless in comparison to the extremely strong and capable vampires that they're fighting. So understandably, with every chapter, I'm like, how the heck are they going to fight these vampires? Because it seems literally impossible. I'm cleaning and tidying up the apartment today, so I'll probably be listening to more of Empire the Vampire. Other than that, I do have some editing to do and some stuff to do on the computer. But yeah, so far I'm still loving this book. Hi, Nuna. Hi, Nuna. Hi.
Luna. Luna. High five. Good girl. Yeah, I know. Oh.
So I have less than 100 pages left of this monstrosity of a book, and I can say that there has been some character development with the Silver Saint, as well as the boy who knows where the Holy Grail is. At this point, I don't want to get into spoilers, but there are a few twists that I've already gotten through, and they are quite a bit interesting. I will say too that every single chapter is packed with information, and if it's not packed with information, it's all action. I have such a short attention span, so the fact that I've made it this far reading mostly physically instead of on the audiobook is really surprising to me. So like I said, less than 100 pages left, and this is the first book in a series, so I'm not really expecting it to have like a completely happy ending, but I'm hoping for some sort of like a good resolution to this. I think since it starts out where the main character is in a prison and he's telling his story from this prison, I feel like he's just gonna escape the prison and that's where it'll leave us hanging. I don't think that they're gonna bring an end to the endless night, but I don't want to give any spoilers in case that does end up happening. So I'm gonna keep on reading. I'm probably gonna finish this tonight, and I'll check in with you guys after I finish the book.
A few moments later.
MVSA, make vampires scary again. I just finished Empire of the Vampire, and needless to say, there is a lot to cover. First off, keep in mind that I had never heard of this book prior to picking it up in the library. I decided to check it out because I was interested in reading an epic fantasy on that day, and I also really love vampire stories, but I did not expect to be as hooked as I was when I was reading this book. The speed at which I read it was almost ungodly. I have such a short attention span that I would have never expected myself to read a book of this size, let alone a book that I mainly read physically. Like I said, the main character, Gabriel, is super unlikable. He gets on everyone's bad side, and he cusses so much that it's actually kind of annoying to hear about it. Honestly, it takes me back to the days where I was in the Navy and I could not go one sentence without uttering the F word. So I totally get it, but I totally understand if this would not be somebody's cup of tea. Almost wasn't mine, I will say that. But as we go further into the story, we learn exactly why he's the way he is, and after we see a little bit of vulnerability from him, he softens up a little bit and we get some of that sweet character development. And one of the things that makes or breaks these kinds of stories is the way that the friendships are formed. And in my opinion, I feel like the friendships that were written in this story were amazingly done, especially the friendship between Gabriel and Dior, the boy who knew where the Holy Grail was. And one quote that Gabriel constantly repeats throughout this book is, "My friends are the hill that I die on." And he stands by that. Each time he says that phrase, I totally believe it. Romance is one of those other things that makes or breaks these kinds of stories, and I thought the romance was okay for what it was. Personally, I appreciate the romances that start off as friendships, and I kind of feel like it started off as a friendship, but they were kind of flirting at the beginning too. But this romance was also forbidden, so I feel like that adds a little bit of an element of spiciness to it. And with a story like this where the romance plays a huge role in it, I feel like it could have been done a little bit better, but for what it was, I think it was okay. And I also want to say that I think it's a little bit cliche that the whole driving force for this book was for the love of his wife and his child, but when you write a character that has such a great relationship with his family, it's kind of understandable. But just know, if you're kind of tired of that whole thing, you may still like it, but it is a little bit cliche. There is also a really huge emphasis in religion in this book, and as I was reading some of the Goodreads reviews, there wasn't that much talk about religion. I mean, maybe I didn't read enough Goodreads reviews, but I didn't really see anyone mention how big religion plays a part in this book. It bears a huge resemblance to Catholicism and Christianity, and so if you have any religious trauma related to those religions, I would highly recommend that you do not read this book, because yeah, there's a lot of really bad themes that comes with that. The main character battles with his faith throughout the book because he has so much taken away from him, and he's constantly questioning, if God knew everything that was going to happen, then why did he deal us these cards? Why is everything according to his plan when everything is so terrible, kind of thing? And so I wouldn't say that this book is completely for or against religion, but religion is such a huge role in this book. It's literally most of the book. You cannot ignore this. I think if anything, this book would be against the organized form of religion, like having to go to church or mass or whatever, but it would be for the faithful aspect of religion, where it's just dealing with your own personal belief in God and stuff, I guess. I don't know. And if you're not familiar with Christianity or Catholicism, I really wonder if it would really make any sense to you. Likewise with all of the random French terms that they throw in this book. And let me say this again, if I didn't say this enough, this book had me so excited to keep reading it after every single chapter. I just wanted to keep reading more. And that is due in part to the sheer amount of action and lore that this book dishes out in every single chapter. Every single step of the way, you are reading something that makes you excited, or you learn something that will keep you intrigued. And for me personally, I found myself really excited to pick up this book and read more, because even if I read one chapter, even if I only had time to read one chapter, I still felt satisfied after reading that one chapter. I think I really like this book because the author does a really good job of making the stakes high in this book. I guess to quickly paint the picture of how high the stakes are drawn in this book, you have the main character, who is this mortal man, and his thirst for blood gets stronger the older he gets, and he's essentially becoming a slave to this thirst. So he's basically getting weaker every day that he lives. And then you have these ancient vampires, and the older that they get, the stronger that they get. They're fast, they're strong, they have all the time in the world, and worst of all, they are incredibly cruel and have zero regard for humanity. So those are the odds that the main character is up against, and he continuously throughout the book thinks of ways to best these incredibly formidable foes. Call that plot armor if you will, but we wouldn't have this entire series if the main character ended up dying in the middle of the first book. So I guess to sum it all up, this book doesn't have a happy ending. Like I said, it's the first book of a series, so there are still a lot of plots that are left to be discovered in future books. But for what it is, I think it was a wild ride, and it was totally worth my time to read. The ending left me super excited for what's to come, and although the ending wasn't a completely happy one, I think it ended very well. So yeah, that is my full review of Empire of the Vampire. I guess the last thing that needs to be said is that I really love the illustrations in here. That was also part of the reason why I wanted to keep going, was that I wanted to see which picture I would come across next. And you probably saw some of the illustrations, so you'll know that they are really well done. And yeah, if anyone reads this book, please let me know what your thoughts on this book. I expect that it will be a mixed bag with this book because the main character is kind of unlikable. So yeah, if you read this book, please let me know what your thoughts are. Even if you disagree with me, I would love to know your thoughts. And I guess to put the cherry on top of this amazing story that I loved, I think that this book got me excited to read fantasy novels again. I've been reading a whole lot of random genres lately, and I feel like it's time for me to have my fantasy arc, my fantasy era. Subscribe if you want to see more vlog content where I also talk about books in my vlogs, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!